Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and our guest today is author, poet, activist, lawyer, and teacher, Reginald Dwayne Betts. We talk today about poetry, incarceration, and the ways we punish and police each other. Dwayne is also the founder of the Million Book Project, which is a nonprofit run through Yale's law school that sends books to prisoners all over this country. You'll hear us discuss the organization on today's episode. And if you want to contribute to the work of the Million Book Project, I've left a link for you in the show notes. I am personally challenging the Stacks community to raise $50,000 for this incredible organization in the next month. And I know that $50,000 is a lot of money, but if you think about it this way, we only need 2,000 people to donate the price of one book, $25, and we will hit our goal. Plus, I have some giveaways and other fun things planned, so make sure you're following The Stacks on Instagram at The Stacks Pod. And just know, for every $5,000 we donate, we can fund an entire library in a prison. So please consider making this donation. As the Million Book Project mission says, their work is to harness the power of literature to counter what prison does to the spirit. So please, please, please click the link in the show notes and make a contribution. No amount is too small. The Stacks Book Club pick for April is The Tradition by Jericho Brown. We will discuss this poetry collection in detail with Reginald Dwayne Betts on Wednesday, April 28th. I want to give a quick shout out to the newest members of the Stacks Pack on Patreon. If you'd like to join these fine people, please head to patreon.com/thestacks to earn inside access to the show and to make new episodes possible every week. Thank you to Courtney Coulter, Emily McConnell, Tatiana Petsimas, Sarah Fink, Caroline Anderson Gray, Jessica Darden, Marissa Lind, Amber GQ, Meta, Bryn, and Jolene Jacket. Thank you so much for your support of this podcast. Okay, now I am thrilled to introduce you all to Dwayne Betts. All right, everybody, I am here today with author, poet, activist, lawyer. I know I'm leaving out titles for you. You have a million titles, but it is Reginald Dwayne Betts. Reginald, welcome. I'm going to now call you Dwayne for the rest of the time, which we'll talk about. But welcome to the Stacks.
It is my pleasure. You know, the Stacks is it's the spot. It's the spot. It's the place where books matter. So it's my pleasure to be here.
Oh my God, that makes me so happy. I have to say, the way that this came about for folks who don't know is that when I posted my 10 favorite books of 2020, Dwayne was like, "Where's the poetry?" And I was like, "I don't know how to read poetry." And then we started a pen palship where Dwayne sent me poems and told me like about them and basically made me feel like I could read poetry. So now here we are a few months later, and we're going to talk about poetry. And for everyone who's listening, it's April, which is Poetry Month. So this is sort of a perfect jam. But before we get into all the poetry and all that, I want to kind of get to know you a little bit better. So will you sort of tell us about yourself?
Yeah, no, and you know, I write memoirs too, and I write poetry, and a lot of it is in the first person. And it's a struggle because somebody says, tell you about yourself, and you want to have something articulate to say, and then you feel like everything you leave out is who you really are. But I would say, you know, I say I'm a poet and, you know, husband, father, that kind of thing. You know what? Nah, fuck that. This is what I'm going to say about me. I met my wife in a bookstore. You know what I mean?
You did?
Like,
Which
yeah,
bookstore?
Caribou Books.
Okay.
And, yeah, and the first real job I had was at Caribou when I was chopping it up with Yao he was selling books at Bowie at a event on a Sunday. And, you know, and I say that both of those stories is to say I met him, and then that led me to getting a job at Caribou. But my conversation with him was so candid because we were just talking about the books that he was selling. He had Sonia Sanchez, Walter Mosley, you know, The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. I mean, he just had books that I was familiar with, that I had read, and I read most of the books that he was selling. And then I was working in a bookstore. My wife, well, then this woman walked in, and she was getting a book for a college course. And we later started dating, and then, you know, we've been married for like 13 years. And I think if somebody was to say, who am I? You know, I would say, tell you a little bit about myself, is that my life has revolved around books as if books were the sun. And it's the thing that's been giving me sustenance for a long time. And so all of the other things I am, from poet to memoirist to father to husband, like all of that sprung from my relationship with books, even to being an attorney. You know, I became an attorney because I was in a cell with a cat who asked me a legal question I didn't know the answer to. And then to prove me wrong, he pulled out a book, and that pushed me to take a paralegal course. So again, like books have been central to everything I am today in a very real way.
Ugh, I love that so much. I think books can provide so much to so many people in so many different ways, which is what allows this podcast to exist. If everyone had the same relationship with books, this would be a really boring, shitty podcast. But everyone brings, whatever their experience is. And I love to hear that that's been a driving force, because for a lot of people, books sometimes come in and out of their life. I mean, for me too, like I was a big reader as a kid, and then I lived in LA. Well, I live in LA, but when I first moved back to LA, I was like, I don't know how to read. And then I was like, yes, I do. And I got back into it. And so now, of course, books are like the center of my world. But I love that for you, it's kind of always been that underlying thing. This is sort of an open question, but I'm very curious, which is what motivates you? You are so young. You're 40, right? You're 40, right? You just turned 40.
I swear I'm older than you, so this is so
No,
funny.
you are older than me, but you've accomplished so much, is what I was going to get to say. Like, you're so young to have accomplished all that you've accomplished in your short life. Like, a lot of people who are 40 have not, lived a life, gone to prison, come out, published books, become a lawyer, gotten their PhD at Yale. Like, you have done so freaking much. You have a nonprofit million book project. You write for the New York Times. You're everywhere, and you're doing so much. So I want to know what motivates you and what keeps you doing stuff. Like, and also, when do you rest, or do you rest?
Oh yeah, no, that's actually a good question. Somebody told me though, they said that I have a chip on my shoulder, and it is the thing that drives me. And maybe I do have something of a chip on my shoulder, just because you go to prison when you're 16, and it becomes not the defining experience of your life, but but the gravity
Mm,
that threatens to pull you into a black hole.
mm-hmm,
And I think everybody deals with it differently, but I probably spend a lot of my time trying to prove that I shouldn't be there. And then I spend an inordinate amount of my time returning and trying to get other people out. And I say inordinate because like I don't really actually think it's anything necessarily noble about this shit. Like I don't really think it's anything noble about the Million Book Project. I think that I love books and I get to do something that's really cool. But in the process of trying to do this, I'm talking to department folks in the Department of Corrections. I'm talking to commissioners. I'm talking to secretaries. I'm talking to wardens. I'm talking to librarians, and it's forcing me to get deeply entrenched into the way in which books might affect how they do their work and how they see themselves. And it's a different conversation than I expected to be having. I'm getting
mm,
letters from people who are locked up who telling me how books matter. I try to get my homies out of prison. I go to law school because I can't get a job, and then I realized I went to law school to get my friends out of prison because if you're a lawyer and you got friends locked up, you can't tell them no when they ask you for help. And
right.
so what I mean is that it's just like the kind of gravity that threatens to drown me, but at the same time, it is the kind of gravity that motivates me because I'm always trying to prove something. And I'm restless, so I can't work in the office. I can't have somebody else telling me what to do. I mean, I imagine it might be possible, but those 8.5 years in prison made it really, really difficult for me to imagine uh, sitting still for any measurable amount of time.
Mm,
But I don't know if those things are motivations as much as, just conditions of living,
hmm.
and it's just kind of sad. It's not sad because I am happy with all I've accomplished, and I don't mean to say that, but so much of it is hinged towards sort of the chip on my shoulder that's always constantly trying to prove something. And I think if you're always trying to prove something, you probably taking on too many fights.
Yeah. What about rest?
Mm, I sleep 3, 4, 5 hours a night.
Excuse
Like
me, 3? Did you say 3 as in that was enough?
it depends. It depends. I used to be an insomniac, and now I just can't go to sleep before 1. And the problem is, I wake up when the sun wakes up.
Okay.
So, and I know it because I'm like, oh, I know what time it is. It's 5:50, and I'll get up. And so I
Mm,
know I'm gonna get up around 5:50 every morning. And it just depends on what time I go to sleep. And I go to sleep around like 1. So I don't know.
okay.
I ain't trying to live too long. I'm trying to live to be like 72. That's beyond the average life
No.
expectancy of a black man is 67. So I'm trying to be real. I'm trying to beat the odds a little bit, but not too much.
You're not
So
trying to get carried away.
I want to tempt fate.
Okay. Okay. Well, if that's your goal, I hope that you live longer because I feel like you could fill the world with words for sure for all of us. I read your memoir and I really liked it. I was very moved by
Ah,
it. And I do have a lawyer question though, because I don't know the answer to this. And you're here and it's your story. You were convicted for attempted and actual crimes. And I'm confused how both things can happen. If you actually did it, how do you get in trouble for attempting to do it?
I realized when I was writing my piece for the New York Times Magazine, I actually have, I ain't gonna pull it out, but I have my confession somewhere. And it is such an embarrassing document, man.
Mm,
Um, and I think I said like dear man in a such and such car. I mean, I ain't really have a gun. I know you probably feel bad about it, but I'm sorry. I just, some bullshit like that.
mm-hmm.
And I attempted to rob these two women. And so it was two crimes. And I realized when I wrote in my book, I didn't talk about the latter crime because it's embarrassing. And when I wrote the
Mm,
New York Times piece, though, I did talk about it. Um, but so that's how it happens. It was two different incidents on the same night within like 30 minutes apart. But it is embarrassing. I mean, and this is the interesting way in which people don't talk about these things when they talk about criminal justice reform. I'm not gonna say people don't talk about it. I find that I don't hear it discussed enough um,
okay.
about the weight and the burden that you carry around knowing that you've done this thing. A- And I signed the confession. I mean, this shit is crazy. If you looked at it, you'd be like, dude, that looks like how you autograph books now. Like I signed this fucking confession like I'm gonna be somebody. And everything on this letter says I ain't shit except my
Right.
signature. My signature says, dude, it's gonna be somebody. Everything else says this young boy ain't shit, but my signature was like, I'm gonna be somebody. So
Right.
I was mad, and I wasn't even mad at the police, and I wasn't mad at the people that I robbed. I think I was mad at myself, and the signature was a way to remember. I mean, I had worked on that signature. You know what I mean? I had worked on figuring out like how do you, like how do you, and it's funny too because I've always been Dwayne. What do you think I signed? R. Dwayne Betts. That's so funny.
I do want to talk about your name. That's a perfect segue. So your writer name, the name on your books is Reginald Dwayne Betts, but you go by Dwayne. And there's a part in your memoir, A Question of Freedom, where an intake person, I believe, asks you what your name is, and you tell her Dwayne, and she's like, "I don't have a Dwayne on my list," and you're like, "Oh shit, she means Reginald."
My dad's name is Reginald, and growing up, everybody always called me Dwayne, and not even really to distinguish me from him as much as I don't know why, but my mom always called me Dwayne, and so it was almost as if Dwayne was my nickname as opposed to, um, Puddinhead or Juice. One of my aunts used to call me Juice, but I ain't never really have a nickname. It's one of the things that I regret, and I haven't given my children nicknames, and one is 9 and one is 13. It's kind of you've grown into it by then, so I feel like it's one thing I regret in this life is not giving my children nicknames and not having my own nickname.
Hmm.
But I've had a bunch of names though. Shaheed, Dwayne. A couple people call me Reggie. People I don't like call me Reginald. So I had a lot of
Okay.
names, but I haven't had nicknames.
People I don't like. Well, I'm glad that you told me to call you Dwayne because I would have called you Reginald because that's what's on the book. And I don't want to be a person you don't like. So thank you
And
for
I just
giving me a
revealed,
chance.
I literally just revealed the secret on a national podcast. So now folks is gonna be like, I knew he didn't like me.
Yeah. They're going to be like, why didn't you tell me? I will call you Dwayne. Okay. This is the big question that I want to talk to you about, which is I've been thinking about this a lot because of the world that we live in. And reading your work and getting a sense for you, I know that obviously you're passionate about helping folks who have been incarcerated and trying to make room for those people and have them be seen and heard and fully accepted. And so I'm really curious about sort of forgiveness and redemption and what that looks like in a public way, but also in an interpersonal way, especially like when we think about cancel culture or whatever you want to call that, or we think about like public accountability. And I don't know. I've been grappling with this for like the last few months. I've been thinking a lot about it. And I had never really thought about the ways that we as individuals want to put our loved ones in prisons of our own making for mistakes that they've made, or public figures for missteps or or blatantly racist comments or blatantly sexist comments. And I don't know. I'm just curious what you think about all of that.
I think that's a I think that we are in a moment that we aren't prepared to be in.
Yeah. I feel so unprepared for this.
And but I think the reason that we're unprepared is because we've just been lying so long. I mean, I remember, new criminal justice reform work, and I'm supposed to not say that I carjacked somebody. I'm
Right.
supposed to not say that I put a pistol to somebody's face, or I'm supposed to act like you're being honest with me when you say, yeah, but you shouldn't have went to prison. I mean, maybe a couple months. And I'm like, I know you didn't think that,
Right.
because I know how the whole court responded when I had the pistol. And so I think that we have not fully developed any true expectations about what punishment looks like. And I think punishment is important. We say punishment is not restoration, but the reality is that there are a lot of harms that folks can't be restored from. And there are a lot of people who don't want to be restored from the harms from certain persons. And so we don't have an account for just some baseline level of, like, I did my time in prison. You got to leave me the fuck alone. I
Right.
did that 8.5 years. I'm not going to be accounting for it no more. And I know that, and I can stand on that. But for a lot of things that people don't go to prison for a lot of things that prison is completely off of the table for, we truly have no account of what we want that will force us to figure out a way to move on. We are mad, and so I don't know what it looks like. I think one way that it looks like though is a really purposeful, deep, and complicated conversation about what we think people owe and what we think is permissible for us to do in the face of what they owe.
Hmm.
And we could say, what do you owe if you steal a car? And then the answer could just be, get insurance. That's how we gonna deal with that. But what do you owe me if you hit me in my eye?
Mm-hmm.
Because we fighting, first of all. I'm not turning the other cheek. Somebody
Right.
swing on me, we fighting, right? And so like I just think, I mean, even as writers, the question is really, how do writers write into the world, into an imaginative space, what accountability looks like? I don't have answers, and I represent people on parole. I got an email today from somebody who, I worked. It's a long story, but anyway, he found out when his parole hearing is, and this motherfucker is so happy. He called me Dwayne. I'm like, yo, my name's Shaheed, man. Don't call me Dwayne. And he like, what the fuck? I thought your name was Dwayne, and then your name is Reginald, and now you Shaheed. But but it's a sheer amount of he was like, I'm thanking my lawyer now. I mean, when I just talked to you and you like one of these niggas I'm locked up with, I call you Shy. But nah, you done gave me some good news as an attorney, so today you get to be
Right.
Dwayne. But but like for him, this cat got, like a murder beef. He been locked up 2 decades, and I'm gonna fight tooth and nail to get him out. But the person that's dead might argue that those 2 decades ain't enough. And I don't know. I think we have to figure out how to have a conversation. And I don't think it's just about what makes victims whole. Because all victims' families, because sometimes ain't nothing gonna do it.
Right. Well,
You
that's
know?
one of the things that I'm talked about on the podcast before. And I've had this conversation a lot of times with friends and family and whatever, is that I don't believe that victim statements should be part of sentencing. I don't believe in that because I feel like you could get the luck of the draw. You could get a person who's all about forgiveness, or you could get a person who's sort of hateful and doesn't see anything outside of their own pain that they've been caused or their family or whatever that looks like. And I mean, one of the things I struggle with in this conversation is that I love a rule. I love rules. I'm just one of those people. I love a checkbox on a to-do list. I love a rule. I love to be told how to behave. I love all of that stuff. But then when I think about people's lives being put in prison, it's not fair that if someone kills me and my mom is feeling particularly forgiving, that person could have a better shot than if my mom was feeling particularly vengeful or whatever.
Right. I mean, no, that's the trouble and the challenge with restorative justice, but it's one iteration of it, because it's also an iteration where you imagine is not predicated on who the victim is, it's predicated on the process. And you can have surrogate victims, and the idea is just the process, not necessarily how a particular individual feels when they come into play in the situation. But I do think that that's one of the things that like thoughtful practitioners have to think about. And I do think if we say how do we make the it shouldn't be because I think it's just we have to think about it and we have to have real conversations about it because it is true. Everybody wants to point to the victim who doesn't want the most harsh crime, harsh punishment for a crime, as if the opposite of that isn't also out there,
Right.
and the opposite is frequently out there. And I think it's a challenge, and we haven't even gotten to like the nitty gritty of horrible writers,
Mm.
of like horrible people who we know because our circle is so enlarged by the work that we do. How do we respond to people who have hurt people who are in their families? And if we got really serious about it, we would say, how do we respond to people who have hurt people who are close to them? And it has been like domestic violence. It has been the
Mm-hmm.
things that we don't talk about publicly because there still isn't real room to talk about it publicly. I think that is the rare occasion. See, we've created. You talk about you a person that loves rules. Well, I was facing life in prison for carjacking. I was facing actually life plus 23 years, and I ended up with 9 years. So that should just say the absurdity of the scale. How do we
Right.
go from the possibility of forever to only 9 years? I say nobody goes to prison for more than 20 years, and that asserts a huge amount of downward pressure on sentences as they exist. I say that most people who are locked up, you start telling people we don't lock people up for car theft. We don't lock people up for theft. We don't lock people up for larceny. And that exerts all kinds of downward pressure. You don't lock people up for DUIs. All of these things are what people go to jail for now. And I say that we radically create a system in which people don't punish folks for the crimes they've committed. We have a system in which all of us punish people for the crimes they commit. And they punish people explicitly and they punish people like on the low. They punish people via text, they punish people via shaming, they punish people via denying them opportunities, and they don't just do it like when you got a criminal conviction or a felony conviction. They also do it when you just have plausible allegations about you. And so I think to just say fuck it, everybody, you don't do more than 20 years. That exerts downward pressure on the system, and then as a baseline, we can start thinking about everything else. Everybody I represent has done more than 20 years in prison. So they would all love the idea. They'd be like, shit, I'd have been home 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Right. What about for interpersonal things? You talked about where there's allegations and stuff. How do you think about being an abolitionist or being a reformer, punishment in those ways when there's not jail time or prison time on the table, but maybe somebody wronged you or harmed you or had a racist tweet or whatever that looks like? Because I do feel like those things are connected. Like I can't say that I believe in prison reform if I don't believe in the ways or reforming the ways that I punish the people in my life. Like I think it has to be a total like change of thinking.
Yeah. I see this is how it gets real. First, I don't know if I know people who I want in prison or I want to do violent things to.
Right.
So I'm not sure if and I want to say that I'm an abolitionist, but admit that and admit for real, if you touch somebody that I love, it's like
Right.
I'm just like that. I don't even want to contemplate what's going to
Right.
happen, right? So I want to admit that and still say I want to say I'm an abolitionist because abolition is supposed to be hard work. Abolition is supposed to not just think. For me, it's supposed to be hard. It is supposed to be not just some principled position that people shouldn't be in prison. Because I know people who I think should either be in prison or I mean, I'm having this conversation playing with a knife. You know what I mean? Like, like it's a nice knife though. It got an onyx blade. You know, but like, and but I think that if we are serious about not punishing people, we have to be serious about the ways in which we want to punish, and we have to be serious about how do we get over that, and we all get over it
Right.
except to the degree that the society has now made it really, really permissible. And it's just permissible because we don't know what to do when we hurt. And so I think in those interpersonal relationships, we really have to figure out what to do when we're hurt. It used to be that you just had no voice and things just happened and you were just supposed to deal with it. And that's not okay either. That's clearly
Right.
not the happy medium or alternative. But I do think yeah, I don't know. I mean, and part of it is if it's employment, all of those kind of things. It's like, yeah, mercy and forgiveness though. they aren't conditioned on whether the other person is worthy or deserving. And
Mm,
so the real question, and when I decide to forgive or have mercy or whatever the case may be, I got to recognize that it's not conditioned on whether or not the other person is worthy. And I think we have to spend more time saying that like, I'm letting this go because it makes me a better person to let it go. And I want to be a part of a system and a community that creates some safeguards and put the onus on the safeguards that's in place from preventing X from happening
hmm
again. And there may be some point in which people need to be excommunicated from communities, in which people need to no longer be allowed to work in certain spaces and be in certain spaces. But I think that we haven't ever really in these interpersonal relationship kind of things. And so I'm just thinking about the literary community. That's all I'm thinking about is writers and how we police our own spaces. I don't think that we ever really responded to something that happened with a robust account of what prevention looks like. And so
right,
maybe, forgiveness and mercy becomes easier if we have a more legitimate conversation about prevention and about education, you know? Um,
right, right.
but I don't know, man. I'm not a saint. Sometimes I just want to go away. It was so much easier in prison because we just did our time. And the question was always, damn,
Mm,
when is enough? I mean, is this enough? Is this enough? Is this enough? It wasn't a question of like, sometimes I feel like the questions we grapple with now are a bit harder because we end up with proxy punishments
hmm.
and punishments that we don't have to articulate, but we know we watch happen.
Yeah. And then when people get released from prison, we're still being asked to be punished, or they're still being punished,
Yeah.
right? Like you, in your story, you struggled with being able to become a lawyer. You still had to prove
I,
yourself. It's like,
I had a full tuition academic scholarship to Howard University. And I have not gotten an apology for them snatching my scholarship because I've been in prison. And I've never had a Howard graduate say to me that is fucked up how we treated you.
right,
I've never had a Howard graduate write publicly like that is fucked up how my institution treated you. And people think, Dwayne, you need to let this go. You keep talking about Howard, you let it go. I won't let it go because I was the commencement speaker when I graduated from Maryland. Damn it, you know, like I did my thing when I went to Maryland, and I got a law degree from Yale. And somebody should say the way we processed this was fucked up,
hmm, right,
but nobody will because accountability doesn't exist for institutions in that way, and it doesn't exist for people who punish others in collateral measures in that way.
right,
And it also doesn't exist in the sort of interpersonal ways that we punish others in a world in which there is no, prison punishment, public thing that happens. It's never going to be a way in which and that's why we really have to have those conversations because if Howard doesn't have to do anything, then I don't have to do anything when I decide not to fuck with, whoever for whatever reason. And I've probably done it. I mean,
right,
I know I've done it. You know what I mean? I know I've done
right,
it.
right.
Some people listening right now thinking, damn man, what panel was Dwayne on that he did not give me that fellowship? I'm bullshitting. I I forgive everybody though. I forgive
Right. But I
everybody.
feel like forgiveness is a practice. I feel like forgiveness is not something that is necessarily, at least for me, I can hold a grudge. I mean, famously, for anyone who knows me, knows I can hold a grudge. But it's something that we have to really practice because what you said about worthiness, if other person may or may not be worthy, but we have to figure out ways for ourselves to heal our communities, whatever, so that we can release that because if the standard is you deem the person who hurt you as worthy, I mean, that's a really hard standard. That's ridiculous because it's almost impossible.
Because a lot of people, for real, because a lot of people just aren't. They just aren't going to be
Right.
worthy. And that's scary though. That is like really scary. It's like, what does it mean? And what does it mean for your friends?
Right. Because you might not be worthy in someone else's eyes. And so if that's the metric, it's just so arbitrary. And then, I mean, if you're worried about what everyone thinks about you, you need to be worried about yourself and what you're able to release and how you're able to forgive because worthiness just isn't a valid measure. And it's certainly not quantifiable. I also do want to transition a little bit to poetry since that's allegedly why you're here. But I also feel like this is such an important topic.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to talk about poetry later and at the end of the month when we talk about the tradition for the book club. So, in your book, Felon, which is your most recent book, It's a poetry collection and it's very good. And the cover is insanely gorgeous. And it's just a really incredible collection about your experience in prison and prison sort of more generally and what they do to the human spirit. And one of the things I've learned from talking to you and also just reading your work is I can tell that in addition to loving words, you really love form. So I'm just a little bit curious if you can explain to us sort of how form informs your work.
Yeah, and actually, I think that in some ways, like the conversation that we just had, is like deeply rooted in my practice of poetry. And I don't have real answers, but I try to write narratives that make me think about what forgiveness is, and part of it is baked in a form. No, actually, because I think the stricture and a structure of form allows my mind to go places that I wouldn't naturally. And when I do that, I think I engage myself in conversations that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Mm.
It's the way in which form creates a certain level of unpredictability in what happens next. And so you take the guzzle, and the guzzle is name a song that tells a man what to expect after prison. Explains Occam's razor. You're still a suspect after prison. And then after prison gets repeated subsequently in every couplet, in that rhyme scheme, expect, suspect always remains. And so I say, Titus Kaffar painted portraits over these black bars. He knows redaction is a dialect after prison. And the rhyme scheme and the repetition of after prison takes me to places that I wouldn't have otherwise gone. And even some of that poem, though, is thinking about what does it mean to be forgiven? My woman doesn't believe in my sadness. She says whiskey, not time, left me wrecked after prison. And it's this conversation, and a lot of that conversation is about confronting what we have done to each other and what others have done to us. And so, the form allows me to explore that. I think it comes up a lot for me because it becomes a means for me to try to access ideas that are apart from what I generally think about the world.
I guess what do you find is more, or what do you find influences you more, challenges you more, form or word choice?
Sometimes they overlap though, right? So I would say, I would say in some ways form challenges me more because sometimes form is just it's just difficult. Word choice is play. Word choice is partly a product of revision,
Right.
but also partly a product of the decisions that I have to make because of form. So I think it's kind of both. But I would say that the thing that's more challenging is form, mainly because I think, you know, the thesaurus, rhyme dictionaries, reading a newspaper, listening to other writers, reading other books, all of that turns word choice into something that's fun. But on form, it's frequently no proxy for figuring that out. That's all on you.
Right. Right. In the book, you have 4 poems that are blackout poems. Is that what you call them?
I call them redaction poems, but I think
Redaction poems.
but I just call them redaction poems because I'm trying to be different.
I like that though, because I feel like they're
Legal.
court
Yeah.
documents. And so they're redacted.
Yeah.
It's very cool. I'm very smart. And it sounds way cooler. And redacted fits in that first poem we just talked about. Like subtract, redact. Hello, I'm a poet and I don't even know it.
You see, you on the level of form now.
Well, I think I told you, I love form. I love form. I live for form. The only real poetry that I read regularly is Shakespeare because I was an actress in college and I studied classical theater. And
Oh,
so,
I gotta show you my solo show.
oh, yes, please do.
Yeah,
You must.
I got a solo show based on Felon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, we have to connect on that. But what I was trying to say is that I love form and I can tell through reading your collection that you love form. And so with the redaction poems, are you going in with an idea in mind or are you just looking at the text and hoping that you find something worthwhile in there?
Yeah, so the redaction poems for me, and this is why I don't think it's necessarily different from erasure poems and blackout poems, but a lot of times there's different ways to approach it. So sometimes you approach it and you say like, what what do I want the text to say?
Mm,
And I tried to say, what is the text saying that I'm not
mm,
aware of? And then I wrote a redaction of the Fugitive Slave Act, and I was like, what? I was like, what is somebody who had been enslaved? What do they read in this
mm.
text? So, so I've always tried to redact it not for what I'm saying, but for some other party is saying. But then I set up a couple challenges. I also wanted each page to be its own piece, because like it prints on the wall, so that if you had this one print people versus the city of Ferguson. The plaintiffs, people jailed by the city. The city kept a human in its jail. The person pleaded poverty, held indefinitely, threatened, abused, left to languish, frightened family members could buy their freedom. And you hear that, and it functions almost like a haiku. That's the whole poem. Now that's in a sequence of eight, so each page becomes both its own poem, and together it says something uh, it's the accumulation of everything by the end. But if you just had one print on your wall, then you got one print on your wall, and somebody could look at it and it says something. And
Right.
so I had two goals. How do I reveal what people are saying with the plaintiffs, the folks who are party to this class action lawsuit? How do I figure out what they want you to hear? Not even what the lawyers wanted you to hear, but like, it's like the plaintiffs. Nah, these are people jailed by the city. The city kept a human, not a plaintiff, not a criminal, not a suspect, a human in its jail. The person, remember, these are people. The person is who pleaded. And what did they plead? They didn't plead guilt or innocence. They pled poverty. And so like I wanted the poem to build an argument that was like more complicated, I think, um, even more complicated than what you would have read if nothing was redacted.
I love that.
So,
How do you know when you're done with a poem?
mm,
Like, it seems like something you could revise forever and ever.
yeah, that's why I like the solo show. It's based on Felon, and
Mm.
every poem in it has been revised. Some of them have been short, and it's a combination of poem and story. I do it. This is my set that you're looking at, like these.
Oh, okay.
This comes up. These. So I'd be interested to show it to you. I'll send you a thing. But I mentioned it because every piece in it is revised, and part of the revision process it's like a sculpture. I'm constantly chiseling it, and I hope I don't revise forever. I feel like I'm getting there, and I like what the pieces say together. Part of the revision in this process though was thinking about, you got one playlist which is the book, but people rarely read a book from cover to cover, and so doing a solo show was a way for me to think in a different way about how I wanted pieces to connect with the stories I was telling, the interstitials, but also how I wanted you to receive this thing over 75 minutes, and you get the whole thing, and like let my non-poet lovers, like, you don't like poetry, let me I think you like this.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about one more thing quickly before we get to the books you love, which is the Million Book Project. Can you just tell us a little bit about it and how people can support it?
Yeah, so the Million Book Project is funded by a big grant by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, $5 million grant under the leadership of Elizabeth Alexander. And the project is premise. It's actually funky as hell when you think about it, right? Because this is called the stacks, and a lot of us have bookshelves in our house, our homes, right? Or but it's different though, because a bookshelf is not really the stacks, where you frequent this space, and sometimes you find kinship in libraries and in stacks, right? And so it's premised on me building this 500 book freedom library, but not putting it in the typical library space in a prison, but putting it in people's living spaces. Because what happens is, I've looked out at my cell door and seen people get stabbed. I've seen the guards rushing people's cells. I've seen people bring in trays and slide trays into cells for people to eat on bunks. I've seen like dozens of guards come in and just searching people's rooms, dragging people out of cells. I've been dragged out of my cells. It is a living space that is like, I've seen people get shot. It is a living space that is fraught with degradation. And the Million Book Project is premised on building a freedom library that would exist in that space for as long as people have to live there. And it's 500 books that's curated by me and some other folks in a cool process. Um, and then also it's like a physical space that's built. We got some partners at Mass Design, and they're building a physical space to house the books. And it's not just a bookshelf; it's also places to sit. It's a community spot. And you read a lot of books about prison, and people talk about finding solace, and they really talk about finding solace within the housing units. The space where they have to interact with each other is always framed as it's frequently framed as a space of violence or something, unless they're in a particular group. But I want the discovery that happens. I met my wife in a bookstore. I want the discovery of kinship, of familiarity, or like, you read that book, I read that book too. And what does it mean if it happened where you spend 60% of your time? And a lot of folks are living in these prisons where they spend 60% of their time in sort of like the same housing unit. And now because of COVID, they're spending 100% of their time there. So the project is predicated on not just bringing these million books in the prisons, but also radically transforming the space. And folks could go to millionbookproject.org. That is millionbookproject.org. And
Okay,
they
I'll
could
link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, and they could support us there. And the beauty is, I mean, we've sent in maybe 7,000 books so far. I got, like 500 books in my trunk that I'm about to go mail. And I get a fair amount of joy. I got a box of Keith's books right here that I'm about to send out. It's a carton of his books. It's how many books in this carton? It's 40 books. 40 books in the carton that we about to send out. And so and look, I'm in prison. You're not getting Jericho Brown's The Tradition. You're not getting heavy. You're not getting books that was published in the last 3-4 years. I sent out already. I got 1,000 copies of Miriam Tave's Women Talking. We talking about accountability and what it looks like. I mean, I believe that maybe in some ways our early conversation wasn't incoherent as much as it was us reaching for answers.
Right.
But I feel like it's books that help us reach for those answers. And
Yes,
so
yes, yes.
we're sending in Miriam Tave's Women Talking. I don't think it's been a better book in the last 5-10 years that have been written about accountability and sexual violence than Women
Yeah.
Talking, so
Miriam was on the podcast the year the book came out, 2019, I think. It was a nice
Yeah.
conversation, and that book really does make you think, for sure. A lot of questions, not a lot of answers.
Yeah. Well, it's real, right? Because we were talking, we had a lot of questions and not enough
Right,
answers.
totally. I mean, that's real.
We afraid. We shook. I said
Yeah.
that thing about 20 years and people gonna hate me for it.
No, I mean, that's just your opinion. Okay. Can folks donate books, or are they only able to donate money?
Nah, so it's just money. And the reason why it's just money is because, first of all, and I hate to say this to the Stacks listeners, but I mean, it's true for me too. I'm giving the books that I spill coffee on. What I mean? I'm giving the books that already got read. And security is real in prison, and it might be overstated, but also nobody want out old shit.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you want to show you love somebody that you don't know, what I mean? It's like, imagine giving a stranger. I mean, well, a stranger just gave me a nice old copy of Black Boy that I love, but but typically people want you give somebody a new book to show that you love them. And anyway, the conditions of prison force us to only take new books, and it actually forces us to only sit books that came basically directly from the publisher.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so you can't. So sadly, you can't donate books, but you can donate money. And of course, you could just listen to the podcast, and support that way. You could tell people about the podcast. You could tell people about the project. This is not really all about money or books. We're trying to make people be seen. And so part of what we're doing is hoping that people see us, because as a consequence of seeing us, you see folks on the inside.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to put a link in the show notes, but I'm also thinking that maybe we're going to do a fundraiser for the month of April for you guys, for the Stacks listeners.
Oh, that is so dope.
I'm just brainstorming, but I think we should, because April is the anniversary month of the Stacks. And so when this airs, you'll be the first guest of our 4th season. So we should celebrate. We should celebrate in some sort of fundraising thing, but I'll talk to you about it offline. But I think we're going to do it.
I'm honored.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books, duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind-the-scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. Okay, we're back. So we do the segment on the Stacks called Ask the Stacks, where someone's written into us looking for book recommendations, and I'm going to read it to you, and then you're going to come up with at least one book recommendation for this person. Okay, this one is from Kate, and Kate says, I'd like to incorporate more nonfiction books into my reading rotation, and I'm especially interested in options that are good on audio. I usually don't like memoir, and I really enjoyed nonfiction titles that take a journalistic approach to a historic event or contemporary issues, including The Splendid and the Vile and The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe, and A Problem from Hell by Samantha Power. I've also added Blood in the Water and 1,000 Lives to my list based on your recommendations. Are there a few others I should prioritize? Okay, first of all, I'm just going to say read Blood in the Water. It is incredible. It also ties in nicely to our conversation today about prison, but Blood in the Water is just insanely good. Kate, I would also suggest a book that I talk about all the time by Dave Cullen called Columbine. It's all about the shooting at Columbine. I actually don't know if it's good on audio, but it's an incredible book to read. Another book that ties into our conversation today about abolition and how we treat each other and how we can be forgiving and accountability, and it's great on audio, is called Stakes is High by Michael Denzel Smith. He's sort of grappling with post-2016 election and who America thinks it is versus who America actually is. And then the last one I'll say is Under the Banner of Heaven by John Krakauer. All of his books are so good, Into the Wild, Into Thin Air. But Under the Banner of Heaven is about this like ridiculous fundamentalist Mormon murder story, and it's one of my faves. Okay, Dwayne, what do you have for Kate?
Yeah, that was rough because the one book that I was going to say that is fantastic, Kate mentioned, which is Devil in the White City. I, I remember talking to somebody in admissions for law school, and I was like, "Yo, can I go to this school with a felony?" And this person was like, "I mean, did you kill 6 people?" And then she's like, "Oh, I should have said that." And I started laughing. I was like, "You talk about Devil in the White City, aren't you?" And because I knew the book that they were talking about, the joke was funny to me, and it was cool. And then we bonded. So that's a fantastic book. I must say another book. I think it has Devil in it. Yeah, Devil in the Grove. Uh,
About Thurgood
this is a
Marshall, right?
yeah, that's a fantastic book. And it's actually, what's really complex about it is these questions are like charged. I mean, in that one, he's telling somebody to plead guilty to a crime they didn't commit so that they'd be spared the death penalty.
Mm.
These questions are really, really difficult. And I think sometimes we flatten out the approach in ways that I don't know. But I think that's a great book. So I would say that one. And then I know that she says she doesn't like memoir, but I feel like I have to bring up two memoirs that are just worth reading and I think are fantastic. So I'm going to say Heavy by Keith.
Of course, the most recommended book on this podcast.
Yeah, so I gotta say that. Um, but because it really is good. And one of the reasons why it's good is because it is complicated without being simplistic. So I'm gonna say that.
Mhm.
Then I'm gonna say Tis. I'm not Tis. I'm gonna say the first Frank McCourt book, which was Angela's Ashes, which again is a memoir, but it doesn't feel like it, and it pairs well with Say Nothing in the sense of it's about a culture and a community that we don't know a lot about, and with every page you feel like you're learning something new about a world that's different from the one you live in. And then I'm gonna say two different books by a friend of mine. One is not a memoir, but it is a memoir. It's called Flashwater by Nikki Davidoff. And this is his book about his grandfather. So it's not a memoir as such, but it's a book of nonfiction. His grandfather first escaped persecution from Russia in the early 1900s, and he went to Germany, to Austria.
Uh,
He was Jewish, right? He was like, you could have went anywhere, and you picked Austria, and he didn't speak German, so it wasn't like he picked it for that, right?
mhm.
And it's a fascinating book because then he had to flee Germany to get to the United States. It's not a memoir because again it's written by his grandson,
Mm.
but and the guy's an economist. He's considered like the last man on earth that knew everything. It is a fascinating book. Took a lot of research to do it, and what I find really compelling about it is how he was able to write this story that feels so fully developed, and interesting, and it's about somebody who we clearly cares deeply about.
Mm.
And then the other one by him that I think you should read is called The Catcher Was a Spy.
Ooh.
And I just find this to be a fascinating book. Um, it was written about this cat Mo Berg, who was a former baseball player, um, and like a good baseball player, but was also a spy in World War II.
Mm.
And it is just a fascinating account. Like this cat Mo Berg was so wild that he was corresponding with a journalist, like correcting shit in the newspaper for years and years and years, right? And then the guy's like, this dude Mo Berg is brilliant. I mean, I always get these corrections from him on my column, and they're always right. But Mo Berg had been dead for like 15 years.
Wait, what?
So like what it means to have a mystique around you where you have somebody randomly pretending to be you, and everybody knows you're dead, and you would think that this newspaper man would know too, but he believes it
Huh.
because of how well developed the mystique is around who you are. So I would say um, those four books, and that was a challenging question because I am not a nonfiction person. I read a lot of nonfiction, but I liked answering that because it reminded me of how much joy I have gotten. Oh, you should also read All God's Dangers. It's the story of Nate Shaw. And again, I know you don't like memoir, but this isn't as much memoir. It's like an oral history about this cat named Nate Shaw who
Okay.
came up in the South. And what's fantastic is it just reminds you of what it means to be able to tell your story and how many stories that the medium of the written word precludes us from hearing, just because it's the medium of the written word. So I would throw that one in the mix too.
Oh my gosh, so many. Okay, Kate, if you read any of those books, you have to report back. Other folks, if you want a book recommendation, email askthestacks at thestackspodcast.com. Pretty easy. Okay, Dwayne, now you're in the hot seat. 2 books you love, 1 book you hate.
Two books I love. Man, oh, you know what? This is easy. I love Brief History of Seven Killings by Marlon James. I've read the book 3 times.
Whoa.
Talk about it's fantastic. Reading it out loud is fantastic. On the audiobook, it's just beautiful. Another book I love is Shibumi by Trevanian. It's an adventure book. I learned so much reading it. I only picked it because, as you could tell, I'm damn near blind. And when I was in the county jail, the book cart came around, and I just say, "Oh, give me that book that's all black." And I read it, and I was completely entranced. It's one of these adventure stories. It's cool. I loved it. And one book I hate to say this, but I fucking hate this book.
Hmm.
It is Behind the Beautiful for Others by Catherine Boo.
Mm.
And it won a Pulitzer. It's another nonfiction book, actually. It won a Pulitzer Prize. It's a deeply researched book by a journalist, fantastically written. What bothered me about the book is it made me ask this question, like, what do we do in the face of deep suffering? And it reminds me of that, that photographer who took the picture of the vulture over the kid.
The starving child, yeah.
I think a lot of people, and he got all kinds of hate mail because of that. And
I think he ended up killing himself, right?
yeah, but the thing is, he shooed the vulture away, and I think the question was, what is your job as an artist, right? Your job as an
Mm.
artist is to create imaginative space for us to confront suffering and do something about it. And he took the photo and then he shooed the bird away, but he got all kinds of flack. He ended up killing himself. Um, Behind the Beautiful Evers is it's a really wonderful book, but I hated it because I kept asking myself, what are you doing in the face of this suffering? What are you doing in the face of the suffering? What are you doing in the face of the suffering? Now the reality is that she might have been doing a lot, but she's not trying to make us love her. She's trying to tell the story. And so it's a catch 22 in me saying how much I hated it because I felt like deeply conflicted by getting enjoyment out of this book that was so hard, you know. And then I felt conflicted by talking about how much I hated finding out that she was a really great, really good I mean, they folks think she's a great person and a good person and clearly a really committed writer. And so I'm conflicted about saying I hate it, but it asks me what am I responsible for in the work that I write? We talk about forgiveness and we talk about recompense. I don't know how my work measures when that's the metric. Um, I couldn't say a book I really hate because then people's gonna be like, "You hate my book." I would have said the Iliad or the Bible, and then I would have made my mom mad.
Let's not make our moms mad. Okay, what are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? I just finished Deisha Philia's book,
So good.
which Yeah, it was so good. It was amazing. And I just started reading this is some so I shouldn't even tell you this. Um The Art of Raising a Puppy
Okay.
by the monks of New Skeet. And it's a great book. And I mean, these monks, they know what they talk about raising puppies, and it's really complex. And so I've been reading that. But I also just started reading Clint Smith's new book,
Mm.
which is
How the word is passed.
that's really good.
Mm.
And then I'm reading Black Leopard again because
Hmm.
I'm kind of obsessed with the book, so I'm reading that again.
Love that. Love that. How do you decide what you're going to read next?
I don't know. Sometimes I read stuff for work, and then we're getting a puppy. That's why I'm reading a puppy book. And then
Oh,
with the
okay.
Million Book Project, I've been exposed to so many books I want to read. I'm about to read. I wonder if this cat has been up there. The Prophets. This Robert Jones cat.
Yes, I still haven't read it.
I'm about to read. I'm about to read this, and the real reason I'm reading this is because his people's hit me up and was like, "Yo, do you want 300 copies of this book for the Million Book Project?" And I was like, of course, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I'm reading that book because of that, because his folks was like so generous, um,
Mm.
just on principle, you know. And the
Mm.
book has been doing well; it's been getting great press. So it's not like they're like, we just got these books, we need to get rid of them. It's just like they think
Right.
it's important for people inside to read it, and so I'm gonna read that next. But I don't know. I read books because people recommend them. I read books because I've been thinking about them for a long time. Sometimes I want to read books because like I'm also reading the Odyssey,
Mm.
and I'm reading it to my boys at
Wow.
night. I like books.
What's the last really good book that someone recommended to you?
Oh man, it must have been I can't think of the name of that novel. It was great too, though. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna say the last really good book that somebody recommended to me. And there's been a lot of good books that you read a book and you kind of remember it, but then you
Mm-hmm.
forget the title, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know the whole plot line, right?
Yes.
But you don't.
Yes. Yes.
In this book, it was about this dude who actually fell in love with his uncle's wife,
Wait, what?
and then he went away to the war, and he got captured. And it was World War II, but he got captured. But he got captured like in the I don't know, in like East Asia somewhere, and it's about his struggle to survive. And then and so that book was really good, but I can't remember the name of it. And
Whoa.
then I've read a book that was set in, and I've read two really great books that were set in Australia. I can't remember the name of either one of these, but the book that I remember, and I wish I could remember the name of one of them. I'm gonna find it on my shelf because it is such a fantastic fucking book. And it's one of these books that's like a hard scrabble revenge narrative. It is just so good. The dude is carrying around his daughter with him. He got his daughter dressed like a boy, and he's looking to kill a man, and it is just fantastic. Um, but the last book that was recommended to me that has not left my head since I read it is Geek Love,
Someone gave
and
that to me. Do I need to read it? Is it
it
good?
is it is strange. It is in some ways preposterous,
Mm.
but it asks you every important question about what it means to be alive that I could list. And it has people who are wretched human beings
Mm.
who exist within his family, and it talks about how the family loves them, and it is hard, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
and it also asks all of those questions about forgiveness, you know. It asks
Mm.
all those questions about suffering. It is the strange, beautiful, incomprehensible book that just it reminds me of that poem by Phil Larkin, and it's about like how parents fuck you up. It's something like it's called. Oh, that's what it is called. This be the verse, and it's a short poem. Is they fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the thoughts they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in that turn by fools in old style hats and coats, who half the time wore soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have kids yourself. And this book is like about how parents like really fuck up their children.
Mm.
I found it deeply strange and disturbing and beautiful and wondrous. And I read it a couple years ago, and it has never like let me go.
Hmm. Okay, I have to read it now. What's a book you would assign if you were teaching high school?
I'm gonna answer that in a different way. I'm gonna tell you a trauma
Okay.
story that I just experienced. I'm teaching high school right now poetry, and I just had the students read Power
Okay.
by Audre Lorde.
Mm. Okay.
And the thing is, I you know I think it's a good book.
Okay.
I think it's a good poem. Well, I thought it was. And I don't now think it's a bad poem, but I think it's a really hard poem. And what happened is I had the students read this poem, and it forced me to think about it. And I just remembered the first stanza, which goes, the difference between poetry in rhetoric is being ready to kill yourself instead of your children. And and I just wanted to talk about that. And then you go down to the third stanza, and it's a policeman who shot down a 10-year-old in Queens stood over the boy with his cop shoes and childish blood, and a voice said, "Die, you little motherfucker." And there are tapes to prove it. At his trial, this policeman said in his own defense, "I didn't notice the size nor nothing else, only the color." And there are tapes to prove that too. And the poem goes on, and it's a powerful poem. It's a disturbing poem, and it is also, in a lot of ways, a lot of rhetoric in the poem, and it's really charged. I had these kids read, and I thought this was such a horrible mistake. And I mean, and they were fine, but I don't know. And so one thing I would say is what I wouldn't have teenagers read. And we live in a world in which we expect young people to be ready to take everything on. And trying to have a conversation about that poem just made me realize that sometimes it's okay to be a teenager and not think that like you ready to go work in a factory or take care of a baby or answer the most complicated questions that face our society. And so given that, what I would tell them to read, I think I would tell them I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica Sanchez, which which sadly enough is also a hard book and also deals with some challenging questions. But I saw myself in that little girl, and I saw a lot of the ways in which, it's complicated because it shows how one, like I was telling my son, you don't know who I am. You fucking don't know who I am, and like, and it's
Right.
okay.
Right. Right.
I'm not trying to take you into the madness of my soul and my nightmares and who I had to be at 16 and 17. For what? This is not a Stephen King novel. And but I remember when I was a kid swearing up and down that like I knew who my mama was,
Mm,
you know? And that book does a good job of just allowing you to grapple with what it means not to know your parents and allowing and vice versa, because it shows you how much as a parent you don't know your child, and that shit is frightening. I would have parents and children read that because the realization, and this is why we read books. I had to argue with somebody about the Million Book Project, and they were sort of telling me that I couldn't use a quote from Harold Bloom, and they said I couldn't use a quote from Harold Bloom because Harold Bloom was a horrible person. But but Harold Bloom said we read deeply for varied reasons, most of them familiar, that we cannot know enough people profoundly enough, that we need to know ourselves better, that we require knowledge not just of self and others, but of the way things are.
mm,
And I'm telling you, I feel like I would give that book to a high school student because it says something about what it means to know somebody a bit more profoundly,
right.
and it made me know myself better. And I think it gave me some clue about, how things are that I didn't know before reading it. So that's what I would tell a high school kid to read. And it is a hard book. I mean, it's like attempted suicide in the book. It's death.
Mm.
It's the ambivalence about, losing your virginity. It's like relationships between like children, young folks. And it's poverty and it's violence, and it is a hard book, but it's also wondrous, and it's about books. And I don't know, have you read it?
No, but I do own it. I need to get to it.
It's fantastic. I listened to it. It was great to listen to. I listened to it, and I found myself like folding clothes and doing household chores so that I could pretend to be busy when really I was just listening to this book.
Oh, so relatable. Oh my God. That is me every day. I love that. Okay, this is the quick rapid fire round because we're running out of time. We're actually over time, but I hope that's okay.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean,
Okay.
you was like rapid fire, and I was like, oh, I talk too much. I don't know how this is gonna
No,
work.
we always do this rapid fire. We'll see how it goes. I mean, it's not really rapid fire, but like you could just say the title and yeah, rapid.
All right, I'm gonna do rapid fire. I'm gonna do rapid fire.
Okay, what's the last book that made you angry?
Probably Ghetto Side by Jill Leovy.
I fucking hate that book.
Yeah, I loved
Wait,
it, but it made me really
oh
angry.
my God, no, I fucking hate that book. That book is like a cop love fest. It's like, oh, these good like I'm so ugh. I hate that book. I hate that book so much.
That's so funny. I loved it, but it made me really angry because the shit is just hard, man. It's hard, and
The writing is good, but like I don't know, didn't you think it was just like a fucking
it
like
was a cop
here
fest.
come it was
But
like The Wire, but like all about the cops obsessed with the cops.
yeah, but but when cops pursue people who kill people, that's when you can have a cop fest. You would never have ghetto side about car theft. Like imagine ghetto side about car
Right.
theft.
Sure.
Like we would all
Sure.
be vomiting, right? And so part of the way in which the book succeeds, I think, is that it's like this deeply researched account just of cops pursuing people who have committed murder, which is like the accepted role of police. You know what I mean? So
Right. But it just, I felt like it was like such like she romanticized them so much. And she was like, then they go and they visit the mother. And
yeah,
like, it was like, oh, really? Oh, the LAPD really is doing all this
yeah,
great stuff. Like, I live
yeah,
in
yeah,
LA.
no,
I fucking know those guys. That's some bullshit. I'm
yeah.
sorry. I fucking hate that.
No, that's why. I mean, that's why I said it. You asked me what the book infuriated me. I
That's,
think
I'm,
that's
I'm with
funny.
you. Okay. This is rapid fire has started off on a bad foot. Okay. Okay. What's the last book that made you laugh?
I know it was. I just recently reread it. It was Rion Amaka Scott's Insurrections. He's
Okay.
he's
Okay.
hilarious. He is like really funny and thoughtful. That's it. Yeah,
Okay. Last book that made you cry.
and probably women talking.
Okay. Last book where you felt like you learned a lot.
Shit, that's a good question. The last book I feel like I learned a lot. I'm gonna say this book about dogs 'cause I didn't know any of this stuff, and I think it's so
Okay.
relevant to humans. So the art of raising a puppy, I was
Okay.
completely ignorant. Fucking dogs are like having a child for the rest of your life. I don't know why we just
Yeah.
got a Jack Russell.
No thanks. I have I have 14-month-old twins, so the idea of having dogs is my personal hell.
Congratulations too.
Thank you. What about a book that you are proud to have read?
I'm gonna go ahead and say Moby Dick. I read it to my son when he was 5, and I'm gonna say
Wow.
I'm proud to have done that. That's some G shit.
Yeah. Okay. And what about a book that you're maybe a little embarrassed that you have not read yet?
Yeah. Black Reconstruction.
Okay. I heard you talking about that on the Guess the Book game show that you did.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
haven't
gotta
read it
read it.
either. Okay. Last question. Actually, two questions. What is your problematic favorite book?
I don't even want to say this, but I'm gonna say, what's that dude that wrote man he wrote On the Road. He wrote The Road.
Oh, Jack Kerouac or
No, no,
whatever?
not the
No, Cormac McCarthy.
yeah, Cormac McCarthy. So
Okay.
he has another book that is Blood Meridian.
Mm,
And I hate the book actually. I really dislike the
okay.
book. It's a love song to white supremacy.
Okay.
But it is so engrossing. So I'm gonna say
Mm,
that one because it's well written, it's engrossing, it takes you there, and it makes you hate everything you hate about the world with every page. And so there's
hmm
some value of being reminded of that. But I don't really want to tell people publicly that I like anything that he's written because then it
Okay.
comes back to haunt me because I've said how much I hate it.
Okay. Okay. And here's the last question for you. If you could require the current president of the United States to read one book, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm gonna say that the current president should read Brothers and Keepers
Mm,
by John Edgar Wideman. And I think, I'm gonna say Brothers and Keepers by John Edgar Wideman. It's a pre-mass incarceration book that's essentially a prison memoir, and it has everything in it about how challenging and difficult these questions are, but also about why the government fails and why incarceration isn't a practice that we should, abide by. And the latest edition, has an intro by me and Mitchell Jackson, in which we wrote
mm,
letters to the brothers, to Robert Wyman and John Wyman. But also, you know, Robert Wyman just got out of prison a couple years ago, and he did more than 30 years in prison. And so it's not just an account of what this was like in 1984 when it was published, right? And it's pre-mass incarceration, but it also ends up being an account in a way about the 40 years that follow. And so when we living in a society in which we want to take mass incarceration seriously, if we really want to take it seriously, we got to go back and listen to the accounts that were being given, and when we were really in the thick of this, when we were on the ups, because he got locked up in like the late 70s. So you talking about
mm,
the Rockefeller drug law era. He had a felony murder. So all of the issues that matter get brought up, but they get brought up artfully. And then since he's home and he has a piece in there too, a sort of like epilogue, and it's everything. He talking about aging in prison, and he worked on a unit with the men who were getting older, and then he got older. It's a powerfully written book that has stood, I think, the test of our lifetime. And so, having completely fucked up the rapid fire game. I would say I
No,
ended up on a long note because
that
it was the
one's not
last
a
one.
rapid fire one. The last one is not a rapid fire. You
All
did
right.
perfect. Oh my gosh. Okay, everyone. I if you just joined us, I don't know, it's not the radio, so I don't know how you would get here if you just joined us. But this is Dwayne Betts, aka Reginald Dwayne Betts, if you're looking at his book. Dwayne will be back at the end of the month to discuss The Tradition by Jericho Brown for the Stacks Book Club. Everyone go get your copy of Felon, get your copy of The Tradition, get your read on. Dwayne, this was such a treat. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It was great.
And everyone else, we will see you in the stacks. Thank you so much to Dwayne for being my guest today, and please consider making a donation to the Million Book Project through the link in the show notes. Help us hit our goal of $50,000 toward getting books into prisons nationwide. Our April book club pick is The Tradition by Jericho Brown. We will discuss the book with Reginald Dwayne Betts on Wednesday, April 28th. Make sure you're subscribed to this show wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're listening through Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to leave a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter, and check out our website, thestackspodcast.com. Sebastian Alcala is our sound editor and producer. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrate, and our theme music is from Tagirajis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.